those changes to the recommendation engine in the United States, but the recommendation engine is not the only form of curation. In the United States, there are also changes made to how the curation engine, the recommendation engine works that are US specific. Those relate to the content, the community guidelines.
Insofar as the changes are originating in China, they would be subject to review before being implemented in the US, right? Review through the TTD-USA.
They're not reviewed before they are implemented, but they are reviewed and subject to recall. But I think the critical point is those changes to the code are not the sole content moderation activities. The US recommendation engine also takes account of determinations about what is acceptable content in the US, how should that content be treated. Some content
But in order to apply what you just said, they have to look at what's coming down from Beijing and decide whether it comports with what's acceptable in the US.
Well, some of what they do is just done in the US. It's true that the source code, but I think Your Honor's point, I guess I just have to say, there are many, many US companies that have that use source code that's developed in China. The Weber Declaration talks about that in detail. So the mere fact
that any of them involve apps that reach whatever it is, 1 million people a month?
I'm sorry?
Do any of them involve apps that reach 10 million people a month?
Yes,
in the US.
So many of them.
Why is it? I could not find, Pinkus, in any of your the briefs, indeed in the declarations and so on, any reference to another company that would be subject to the second procedure provided in the statute, the alternative procedure that ends with a presidential determination.
Well, Your Honor, we didn't try to identify one, but certainly one of the reasons.
Well, you did assert that there were several, but well, at least implied that, but by saying every other company would be subject to the second type of procedure. Is there such a company?
Well, I think we don't know what companies, Your Honor. I mean, I guess two answers.
Well, surely ByteDance knows who they're.
Well, we don't know what companies the U.S. government is going to say are subject to foreign adversary control. I think that's one of the problems with this statute, is that the U.S. government could say, here is platform X. We think that they are subject to control by Russia. We're looking at their content. We think they're too susceptible to infiltration by Russia, and therefore they have to be moved to a new owner, even if the parent is a US owner, because that risk is too great. So we don't know what websites the government might argue, but I think the other critical question is, one of the reasons is the exemption of e-commerce sites. We do talk about two e-commerce sites that would certainly meet all of the other criteria in the law, but that are exempted because of the business review exception. Those sites, we don't know, but certainly those sites could well be susceptible to the government's action, but they've been excluded by Congress.
And that, with respect to your earlier colloquy, particularly with Judge Rao, I'm not sure if you did, but if you wouldn't mind again telling me why this is any different than from a constitutional point of view, than the statute precluding foreign ownership of a broadcasting license.
Because the court has said that that a lesser standard of scrutiny applies to broadcast licenses. That's been the justification of all of those decisions, is the spectrum scarcity and lesser scrutiny permits a greater degree of government control. So those decisions, because scrutiny applies here.
Okay, what about the other dozen or 15 statutes that prohibit foreign control that don't have to do with spectrum? Or outdated idea that spectrum.
Well, nuclear waste sites, the government cites a few, those don't implicate First Amendment interests at all. So the fact that the government says no foreign ownership of a nuclear waste site, there's no First Amendment issue in saying requiring divestiture of it.
So it all depends upon our accepting your view that there is a First Amendment issue here because notwithstanding the foreign control potential, we have a U.S. speaker.
I think that's right, Your Honor, and I think that's a fundamentally important.
Can I just ask about the broadcast idea? So if we're in the land of allocating broadcast spectrum space, and the rationale for not allowing foreign ownership in that context is we're worried about foreign ownership begetting foreign propaganda. Would that, in your view, be something that needs to be justified by strict scrutiny? If that's the rationale is we're not going to allocate this slice of spectrum to either foreign control or an entity that's subject to foreign control. That seems to be fine because that's what the law does and it's been sustained. But the rationale for that is it's because we're worried that if that happens, it'll beget foreign propaganda.
I think if that's the justification, strict scrutiny might well apply. There might, again, it might be satisfied because of the scarcity rationale that also applies. But I do think once you get into viewpoint basis, I mean, even in Holder, the court said, you know, very targeted speech, a very targeted congressional restriction. The court said strict scrutiny applies. This is a restriction.
But the speech that was at issue in Holder wasn't foreign speech. I mean, it had implications abroad, to be sure, but what was going on was it was lessons that were being taught. There wasn't a question about an analysis being different because what was being targeted was foreign control, or even foreign adversary control. That obviously.
Yeah, I just think, Your Honor, if the premise of a lesser standard is foreign control, then surely the foreign control has to be demonstrated by some strict scrutiny standard because you're then taking away the rights of the U.S. speaker. So if the premise of applying a lesser standard is foreign control, I think you're still in strict scrutiny because the consequence of that is totally taking away the First Amendment rights of the speaker, and the government really doesn't argue that. And I really want to draw a distinction between foreign ownership and foreign control. I think foreign ownership, for the reasons I said in our colloquy before, would be a pretty shocking change here. Just to go back to Judge Rao's question for a minute about disclosure, I think disclosure has been the historic answer for covert content manipulation. That's what the statute at issue in Mies v. Keen talked about. Just identify the source, and then Americans can make the choice. That's exactly what happened. Again, I'm not saying there might, in some hypothetical world, be possible in some situation to say that that doesn't work, but that's certainly been what happens. And we're not saying that covert.
How do you identify covert influence in a code that they estimate, you know, like the source code, they say it would take 3 years to just review the existing source code?
Well,
much less any updates to the code. So how are you supposed to have disclosure or verified disclosure in that sort of circumstance?
Your Honor, it might be that the disclosure is just the risk of that the government says there's a risk of control. Maybe the disclosure doesn't have to be targeted. I don't know exactly what it could be, but again, we haven't had any exploration here of even if there is control on a record that this court can review, let alone whether disclosure could work. Maybe the government would come up with some arguments that it wouldn't work. I don't think they could. But let me turn for a minute to News America, because I think that really is a root and explains the problem here. I mean, News America was a case where the court said, this statute, even in the broadcast context, targets a specific speaker. We therefore are going to apply heightened scrutiny. And we don't see any reason why Congress exempted this individual speaker from the general rule about when you can get discretionary waivers from the FCC, and therefore we're going to invalidate a prohibition on that. And this case seems to us to be on all fours with that. Here we have a specific US speaker targeted. It's been exempted from a general process that answers a lot of the conundrums that are before this court. What about less restrictive alternatives? What actually is the basis for alleging government control? Here's a record. Here's a reasoned decision that can be reviewed. And then this court can review it. We'd have a lot of the same legal arguments, but part of the issue in this case, and we think it's a constitutional flaw, not just a problem, is that Congress didn't do any of the things that the First Amendment requires.
Mr. Pincus, I mean, if I understand, of course, you think strict scrutiny applies, but assume for a moment that O'Brien is the framework and intermediate scrutiny applies. What is your best argument that ByteDance TikTok can win under that level of scrutiny?
Well, we still think under intermediate scrutiny, there's a requirement to look at alternatives, and there's no indication that Congress looked at the alternatives here. There's no indication that
well, there's alternatives, but it doesn't have to be the least restrictive means.
But they have to be considered. They weren't even considered. And I do think, going back to sort of a broader problem in this case, we have a real threshold question about.
So you're not challenging the government's interest as substantial under intermediate scrutiny, just the tail.
No, I am challenging the government's interest in scrutiny. That's what I was about to say is that the government, as I said, has plucked out this very targeted interest. But I think if you look at what Congress talked about, the problem here is that there was a lot of discussion about content, the imbalance of content on TikTok at times where the government concedes there's no foreign manipulation whatsoever. And I think figuring out what Congress's actual purpose was here, that's the test that the Supreme Court has set up in First Amendment cases. It is very problematic because we really don't know. The government is defending this very, very narrow, or arguing that it's this very, very narrow interest here, but the record is suffused with comments by legislators, both in the House and Senate, about the supposedly imbalance about Palestinians and Hamas, all kinds of current events. Now, we have Mr. Weber in his declaration explains why those allegations of imbalance are wrong, but they clearly motivated Congress in a significant way. It's another reason why the availability of the general standard and the real tainted problems with the specific TikTok provision sets up an alternative where if the government thinks that it can establish a record based on the argument that it's sort of culled together, let it put together that record, look at the less restrictive alternatives that have not been addressed, and also, frankly, consider the facts. Another sort of issue in this case is to rule for the government.
I think you're arguing for us to remand without vacator to Congress for more findings.
I don't think
it's a very, very strange framework. I mean, you know, I know Congress doesn't legislate all the time, but here they did. They actually passed a law, and many of your arguments want us to treat them like they're an agency. It's very strange. It's a very strange framework for thinking about our first branch of government.
I think it's an unusual law, though, Your Honor. It's a pretty unusual law, an unprecedented law, as far as we know, that specifically targets one speaker. We can't find, and bans generally. This isn't Kaspersky or one of these laws that talk about government procurement or the use of government funds. This is a law that broadly regulates and targets that regulation at one speaker. That's pretty unusual. And I do think News America supplies the paradigm. Now, in News America, the court didn't say we're remanding to the FCC, but the functional effect of its decision was to say the FCC will apply the general standard, and then if there's a problem, we'll figure it out. So I'm not saying remand to Congress. I'm saying exactly what the News America court
It's
said.
a rather blinkered view that the statute just singles out one company. It describes a category of companies, all of which are owned by or controlled by adversary powers, and subjects one company to an immediate necessity because it's engaged in two years of negotiation with that company, held innumerable hearings, meeting after meeting after meeting, an attempt to reach an agreement on a national security arrangement, which failed. That's the only company that sits in that situation that is so advanced in its negotiations and its relationships with the government that it's exhausted any further possibility of relief through the second procedure.
Well, respectfully, Your Honor, I guess I'd have two answers to that. One is,
as usual, Mr. Pincus.
sorry, I just want to give the court multiple reasons. Multiple reasons. A statement of reasons for this court to review. It has the
You got a problem? Hear me! Footmen! Arrows! Footmen! Hear me! Archers! Move out! Get moving! We're not looking for a fight. It's been a...
My greetings to you.
You got a problem?
Well, and who do we have?
I'm in command! You best back off. On my command! Follow me! Troops! Onwards! Formation! Move out! Troops! With me! Spread out! in command! Troops! Forward! Stand apart! On my flank! Hear me! Charge!
Heaven be praised!
Oh yes, indeed. I like this. I like this. Hey, yo, hot chat. Do me a favor, man. Speed it up a little bit. From the intro, you know I'm so influential, cause I'm glowing like a candle. The focus is so essential. Dog, what you trying to get into? A steady to flow, ready to blow. Like snotty tissue, they snitching like Donnie Brasco. I'm counting like Monte Cristo. The ghetto full of betrayal, like Iago and Othello. Your fellow neighbor will slay you, they'll smoke you like cigarillos. Police want that info to grill them like portobellos and murdering instrumentals. Cause a rap with the conscience of villains, killers and monsters. So fulfilling the honors, I'm still fulfilling the promise. So nice to kill them with kindness. Hitting like Muhammad Ali, you more like Tatiana. All this is probably karma, you dishonored the father. Whether it's God Almighty or the almighty dollar, we follow the prophets like Islamics or the Dalai Lama. Your bullet points so hollow they could probably pierce body armor. Look in the scope, my people still in target.
Smile on my face, tears of a sad clown. Feeling out of place as I whistle a cab down. If I tip extra, can I huff a cig? Blow my smoke out the window, dropping ashes on the bridge. I'm in New York now, like Akeem and Simi was. Trying to get the lobby door open from a semi-buzz. I just want to go to the slum and throw my money on the floor like the notorious bomb. Build a home, teach a class, start a revolution. Free the mind, heal the body, talking evolution. This that black Elohim Anunnaki rap. That Farrakhan Akeem Olajuwon Gaddafi rap. I dedicate this to my niggas in New Orleans, rocking black and gold stocking caps and fleur-de-lis shocky hats. I'm in the courtroom screaming, who that on the devil? Serving gumbo with a shovel, dog, I'm on another level. Me and Kweli come together like two pieces of metal. We magnetizing the ghetto.
Yeah, now here's the memo. I'm a rebel without a cause, a bezel without no flaws. And shawty, you straight, bet you look way better without no draws. And sweat out this alcohol, bet I'm about to ball and never let up. Look how I just crept up without applause. Fed up with all the frauds and left y'all without a job. The center of attention, this is clever, I'm Pau Gasol. Really though, I'm LeBron. Really don't got my mind on this new school of rappers. I would really go Columbine and throw up the diamond sign. Boy, you know I'ma shine. Flow is in Ramadan. Cause couple years ago, the game had they pajamas on. But now they on my dick, man, I should throw a condom on. Hey, cause a nigga coming raw like I ain't got one on. And I ain't stopping nor copping no please. I just like a low squeeze, dog. I'm on a higher level, I'm on top of nosebleeds. Niggas say they sick, but when they rock, they don't sneeze. Like the nigga on the block waving his Glock, but won't squeeze. Please. Hey.
Yeah. Hold your applause until the ceremony end. Yours truly, blessed yet again, a noble patented. Super magic abracadabra kid, mysterious master gem, black a pant, arrowhead with the long barrel stem, and his apparel fresh. Harbor light shining out the black power grid with the black power grip, and pure power don't power drip. Push the cellar ceiling up and make the tower tip. The Gladwell point, the Babylon polish. All about nothing where it's all about the dollar. And mansions on the fault line of a shaky market. The devil at the dance hall, thirsty for a partner. Get off him. There is not a parcel or a portion or a measure or a fortune more awesome, gorgeous. The funky four horsemen and one more with high tech on the score, one small, of course. You're welcome. Thanks, appreciation for your participation.
Retrograde, we'd shake the frame of your car. Now I know your name, but not who you are. It's all okay, there ain't a drop of bad blood. It's all my love, you got all my love. I'm still out here with the pills and the dogs. If you need me, dear, I'm the same as I was. It's all okay, there ain't a drop of bad blood. It's all my love.
In terms of what level of First Amendment scrutiny to apply, here we have a very robust record demonstrating that what is being targeted is not protected expression. It doesn't sound like from your hypothetical you would have anything of that sort in that case. It would seem like what's being targeted is something much more general that would sweep in lots of conduct, expressive conduct by Americans, ostensibly because it's influenced in some, in some way not articulated by foreign companies. That just seems, it obviously is a lot broader, but it seems constitutionally significant that it's that much broader. So you could distinguish it on both grounds. And here, as I said, we have very strong arguments about the level of scrutiny that applies, and also very strong arguments that any type of scrutiny, including strict scrutiny, given the national security concerns, would be satisfied.
It would be very peculiar to have a statute that applied to all foreign ownership in this, without that kind of a record. That would be including the 4 other countries that make up the Five Eyes, with which we have the most intimate security arrangements. That would include Canada, United Kingdom, New Zealand, and Australia, but also countries as to which we have other kinds of partnership for defense relationships, NATO and so on. I mean, this is so clearly targeted, not just at TikTok and ByteDance, but at China. And the record that you've compiled is all about China.
Absolutely.
Not even the other 3 adversary nations. They're not relevant here.
Right, exactly, and that is an important point, that this is a very specific record about a very specific concern, and
that's the result under applying First Amendment scrutiny, as opposed to whether the First Amendment kicks in and in what way in the first place. It may be that the record and all the particular concerns affect the result, but I was trying to understand the implications of the government's approach for the analytical method that we would use. And can I ask one last question just about Lamont? And so under Lamont, you have a situation in which the government was unable to do what it wanted to do there because of the First Amendment interests of the U.S. listeners in the communist, as we call it, propaganda. Could the response to that have been to adopt a law that just barred the propaganda from coming into the U.S. in the first place?
I'm not sure how you would accomplish that. I mean, the line that was discussed in Murphy and that, you know, was tied into the listener standing cases that the Supreme Court has had over the years was more tethered to sort of whether there's a particularized relationship and whether they have some First Amendment interest. I mean, you might be able to justify it, but in terms of, you know, someone having standing or a First Amendment claim, yeah, I mean, this case is just, you know, this case is so similar to Murphy that I would just sort of urge the court to lean there. I mean, Murphy, people were saying the content curation decisions that are made by the platforms affect the content that I read on the internet on some particular topics, and therefore I have standing to challenge what I regard as impermissible government influence on those content manipulation decisions. And the Supreme Court said no. And I mean, I think that's what they're saying in this case. In Lamont, it was something different. It was saying, you know, either I sent away and said, can you please send me this information, or somebody sent me information and I want to receive it, and I have to, you know, go to the Postal Service and tell them that I want to receive it. I mean, that's just a totally different kind of a claim. And
I think the relevant difference there is that the affirmative act of saying that you want the information is what gave rise to the First Amendment injury there.
That's part of it. Another part, which the Supreme Court has emphasized in a number of cases, is, you know, the connection between the foreign entity and the U.S. entity. You know, they've required something pretty specific. I mean, in Murthy, they described the prospect that any listener would have standing to challenge the inability of someone else to speak as startlingly broad, and that was all U.S. I mean, that entire case was in the United States, and I think combined with the idea from Agency for International Development about sort of exporting your First Amendment right, it would be startlingly broad if you could say, well, I understand that the speaker has no First Amendment rights. I understand I have no particularized connection to the speaker. I'm just someone who wants to read what they say on the internet. But now suddenly, even though they have no First Amendment claim, I do. And that's what the Supreme Court rejected in Murphy in, frankly, what should be a harder context because it was all in America. And that's what the court should do here. Unless there are further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tenney.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Pincus, we'll give you 3 minutes for your rebuttal.
Thanks very much, Your Honor. I just want to start about the question about what happens in the U.S. because the government is just flat wrong. The court looks at the Presser Declaration, pages 815, 812, 815, 817, 829, and the Farrell Declaration, 901. I'll say that again, 812, 856, 817, 815, 829. They talk about how the recommendation engine itself is influenced in the U.S. It's trained in the U.S. on U.S. data. It's modified in the U.S. based on U.S. content moderation decisions. It is clearly embodies not just Chinese speech, that's an issue, but U.S. speech by TikTok Inc. So the idea that there somehow is the ability to say, oh, this is just foreign is just plain wrong. Even if it were, I think that raises some questions. Could a U.S. speaker who wanted to show a foreign movie be told, no, that's unconstitutional and there's no strict scrutiny? That seems wrong as well. So then turning to your question, Your Honor, Chief Judge Srinivasan was asking about, you know, what is this target? The government talks about targeting foreign government manipulation. But the question here, the First Amendment question is what's burdened. And what's being burdened, the government admits there is no foreign content manipulation now. There may never be. What's being burdened is U.S. speech by U.S. users and also as a result of the U.S. decisions with respect to the content moderation engine. I want to talk about the alleged hoovering up of information because it's just wrong. The government talks about precise location data. That's GPS data. That's what that means. And the reason GPS data is important, as the Supreme Court said in Jones, is because it lets you create a dossier about people. GPS data is not collected. User content data, the user contact list data, as Mr. Fisher says, it's voluntary, but more than that, it's anonymized. The record makes clear it's anonymized. The record 847 to 848, the government says that anonymization doesn't work. That's talked about there too. It's a standard technique that the US government uses all the time. The government tries to make something about the fact that some provisions in the NSA prevent some parts of data, some data to be sent to China. Some of that is data that is a result of e-commerce data. There's an e-commerce site. The law requires the collection of that kind of data. The government didn't want in the negotiations, didn't raise that. If that's an issue, we'd certainly be prepared to talk about it. The other thing is I think the government's argument here is premised on the idea that Congress somehow made the determinations that the government relies on. There's zero evidence of that. That's the problem here. Congress had a lot of reasons. The government read one quote about the record. There are numerous quotes about content currently on TikTok, non-manipulated content that were the concerns of Congress. We just don't know what Congress did. And in the First Amendment context, we've got to be pretty careful about what those rationales are. It seems to me to invalidate the law here, the court can rely on existing precedent, News America, strict scrutiny, the failure to consider disclosure and other options. Disclosure is an option here. If the government, the disclosure doesn't necessarily, if the government could make the required showing, have to target only the manipulated content, there could be a general disclosure that the government fears there's manipulated content on this platform. I'm not saying that would be right, but there certainly has been no attempt to figure out whether disclosure can solve the problem here. And the problem is if you go the other way and rule for the government, you have to do some pretty unprecedented things. You have to hold that a content-based justification for general speech is a sufficient justification. That's something that Holder does not support. That was a very, very, very targeted. And then the court has to say, doesn't matter that Congress didn't consider less restrictive means, and the court has to resolve numerous factual disputes in a record that has no entity for the court to resolve them. And we think that's a very, very significant area.
Thank you, Mr. Pincus. Fisher, we'll give you 2 minutes for your rebuttal.
Thank you. I'd like to make 4 points about the First Amendment claim. First, the government cites Murphy as suggesting that my clients in base politics as users of TikTok might not even have standing, let alone a First Amendment claim. As the government, to use the government's own words, we have raised our hand and said, please give us information. We follow other users. We've joined various groups on the platform. So we're doing exactly what the mail recipients did in Lamont. And remember, that's not even the heart of our claim. The heart of our claim is as our own speakers working with our editor and publisher of choice. And there's no suggestion we wouldn't have standing or anything less than a most severe First Amendment injury there. Secondly, there was some conversation about, can we think about this law as having only an indirect effect on the creators? And the answer is absolutely not. The law, by its terms, prohibits a certain publisher from publishing under its own content recommendation system online. And that is our publisher. The very speech that the Act singles out, the social media type speech that it uses in the quote that I read earlier, is our speech. And so the Act targets us directly. Even if it didn't, Sorrell...
Ask you about that. Take the example of the case in which a bookstore was closed, couldn't meet code requirements and ended up having to be closed. And of course, the readers were the collateral victims of that. So if, however, the bookstore is validly closed for that reason or about to be, if the law says that's fine, the bookstore has to meet code and it's not meeting it, you say then the readers would have the opportunity to be considered in that final decision and sort of want an exception to the code because it would impinge upon the readers.
I think there'd be standing there for the injury, but I think that would be a losing claim under ACARA for the reasons Chief Judge Srinivasan was discussing.
Fair enough.
But also, just remember, even if it were not direct, as I've described, Sorrell says you look at in practical operation, how the burden exists under the act, and our speech is being silenced, so we satisfy that. Judge Rao, you asked about sort of the covert nature of the alleged manipulation and how a disclaimer might work. Let me say a couple things about that. One is, it just strikes us as an odd argument to say that an editor and publisher can be, suppressed, or people can be banned from working with an editor and publisher simply because.
You best back off. There's dozens more of us hiding, just waiting for our signal.
Hear me!
Wait, now let me get a word in sometime. Don't talk so damn.
What do I see? Only the nigga I wanted to be. When I was in rehab, like mama, you
Give each other
now
room!
fucking with me. You wanted with me. From the side of the gate where they lie or they hate you, despite how they praise in your face, I'ma make do. Split the cake down the middle when I cut it, quickly split it with my brothers and no bitches we don't love them. I ain't level-headed, so I'm treading when the tide switch. Self-medic, always too restless to let the time tick. Hit the door when it hits 7. Big, heavy, thick-headed, the ink in my pen heavy. Default friendly, but shit can get number 10. Messy, weak, cops, Henny, you grab a bench and you warm it up. 21-4, I set myself and my horses up. Devil at the front door, claiming he want war. The hedges is burning up. See where we from, we ain't learn to run. Unless we was in pack formation. Sharper than a hacksaw, drinking, smoking backwoods. Team on my back like that Jansport, baby. Grown women feel a lot of grown men hating off the strength of appearance and a rap vocation. Mirror, what do I see? The nigga I wanted to be. When I was in rehab, like I was now fucking with me. Look in the mirror, what do I see? side of the gate where they liable to hate you. Despite how they praise in your face, I'ma make do. Split the cake down the middle when I cut it. Quickly split it with my brothers and no bitches, we don't love them. High and level-headed, so I'm treading when the tide switch. Self-medic, always too restless to let the time tick. Hit the door when it hits 7. Big
Back off, stranger, unless you want trouble.
Heavy D, fall friendly, but shit can get number 10. Messy, we cop Henny, you grab a bench and you warm it up. 21-4, I step myself and my horses up. Devil at the front door, claiming he want war. The hedges is burning up. See where we from, we ain't learn to run. Unless we was in pack formation. Sharper than a hacksaw, drinking, smoking backwoods. Team on my back like that dance floor, baby. Grown women feel a lot of grown men hating off the strength of appearance and a rap vocation. Look in the mirror, what do I see? Only the nigga I wanted to be. When I was in rehab, like mama, you see now, fucking with me. You want it with me. Look in the mirror, what do I see? Only the nigga I wanted to be. When I was in rehab, like mama, you see now, fucking with me. You want it with me. Fucking with me.
Hit me! Charge!
Feeling right, you're feeling proud. How are your kids? Where are they now? You build a boat, you build a life. You lose your friends, you lose your wife. You settle in to routine. Where are you? Does it mean? If I get too close, and I'm not how you hoped. Forget my northern attitude. Oh, I was raised out in the cold. If the sun don't rise till the summertime, forget my northern attitude. Oh, I was raised on little light. Bought some shit, you search online, you're getting lost, you're getting high, all alone, late in life, scared to live, scared to die. You build a boat, you build a life, you lose your kids, you lose your wife, you settle down, you're feeling lost, you're getting stoned and kicking rocks.
We're just harmless travelers.
I'm taking command! Troops! Get moving! Listen up! Follow me! Loose formation!
Oi, sorry, I don't think I know you.
Santa Claus don't miss them stockings, liquor spilling, pistols popping, baking soda, Yola whipping. Ain't no turkey on Thanksgiving. My homeboy just domed a nigga. I just hope the Lord forgive him. Pots with cocaine residue. Every day I'm hustling. What else is a thug to do when you eat cheese from the government? Gotta provide for my daughter and them. Get the fuck up out my way, bitch. Got that drum and I got them bands just like a parade, bitch. Drop that work up in the bushes. Hope them boys don't see my stash. If they do, tell the truth. This the last time you might see my ass. From the gardens where the grass ain't cut, them serpents lurking blood. Bitches selling pussy, niggas selling drugs, but it's all good. Broken promises, still your watch and tell you what time it is. Take your J's and tell you to kick it where a falaka is. In the streets with a heater under my dungarees. Dreams of me getting faded under a money tree.
Holly Berry or Hallelujah. Pick your poison, tell me what you do. Everybody go respect the shooter, but the one
Oyez, oyez. All persons having business before the Honorable, the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit are admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting. God save the United States and this honorable court. Be seated, please. Case number 23-3198 et al. United States of America versus Cynthia Ballinger, appellant. Mr. Ken Karamat for the appellants, Mr. Hill for the appellee.
Good morning, counsel. Mr. Ken Karamat, please proceed when you're ready.
Good morning, and may it please the court. I'm Nandan Kinkaramath. I represent Cynthia Ballinger and Christopher Price. They're a married couple. I may refer to them as the Prices. I've reserved 2 minutes for rebuttal. The Prices properly argue that their entry in less than 1 minute walk south a hallway, followed by 5.5 minutes of standing in line to exit, was in complete compliance with the police cordon that was right there at the door. As they entered, there was a police line to the left. They walked to the right for a minute. They encountered Officer Atax, and there may have been another officer there. They never went that point. In fact, no one who entered in the video in that arena went past Officer Atax. That was another side of the cordon. So they walked through an open door, and like any public building, it doesn't mean you're going to go any further. You'd be subject to whatever the police tell you, and they were in complete compliance with whatever the police told them. We're going to highlight fundamental differences in statutory interpretation of restricted area, disruptive conduct, and the count 2 provision that there be in fact causation from disruptive conduct that leads to the delay of the proceeding in this case until 8 p.m.
Mr. Kinkaramath, can I ask you a particular question that I'm interested in? I'm particularly interested in your argument that there was insufficient evidence to support mens rea for counts 2 and 3. More specifically, whether the evidence shows that the Prices had an intent to disrupt official proceedings. Now, of course, it's very difficult to make out an insufficiency of the evidence argument. And so I'm just wondering, what is your strongest argument that there was insufficient evidence to support mens rea for counts 2 and 3 specifically?
So we think that the mens rea must be associated with the physical conduct of the Prices. So you can assemble a lot of statements, right? But what is the physical conduct of the Prices? So let's talk about the 5 minutes standing in line to exit. What is the mens rea of standing in line to exit? It is to stand in line to exit. So the only mens rea issue we have here is really the 1 minute walk, and then the police officer asks them to go no further, and they do. So part of our point is all of this long conversation and all of these other issues, which are somewhat tangential, can't ascribe to the actual physical conduct. And the mens rea scope shouldn't be broader than the physical conduct. So in other words, first of all, you have to have the physical conduct, and we're arguing that didn't occur and that there wasn't a restricted area. Beyond that, with respect to the intent requirement, we think you have to, again, think of the common sense situation here. They observed a door, they went into a door. All of the heightened mens rea requirements, intent to disrupt, all of these other things, there wasn't a lot of facts provided on that, but it all has to rest on the physical conduct of entering for a minute in front of a large number of police officers.
So you're talking about the intent to disrupt the proceeding? That's the mens rea question?
Correct. The key mens rea questions that we're challenging are on counts 2 through 4, Your Honor. Disruptive conduct and demonstrative conduct.
Was it not the intent of the entire gathering to disrupt the proceeding?
We believe that the charges are against individuals, and the question is, what is the individual?
Right, so those individuals who are part of the gathering.
Well, this was an argument made by the district court as a different element, even on the issue of physical conduct, which is that they quote unquote joined the mob. Now, that argument is not opposed or not discussed in the government's brief at this time. We think that is a fundamental point, that the district court has this sort of joining construct. We think that joining construct is not legal because the charging documents talk about individual conduct. They could have charged aiding, abetting, conspiring. They could have charged a group that is permissible under 5104E, but they did not. So the relationship to the group issue, first of all, we don't think there's any evidence of it. They don't know any of these people. So the conduct at issue is their disruptive conduct for the individuals, not their relationship to a group. So we would argue that, and as a point of legal interpretation, we think that's different. Also, we would point out that none of that relationship issue was raised in the charging documents. And so we had no opportunity. The notion of joining a mob was never raised during the trial until closing arguments. So I had no opportunity for discovery. I had no opportunities to talk about the issues. We supplied a joint statement of elements, never discussed this term, this concept of joining. With respect to
how should we understand the district court's credibility determinations here? Because the district court did make some determinations that Ms. Ballinger, Ms. Price, was not credible in describing her motives for participating in the events of January 6th. How should we view that? I mean, because the standard of review here is very, very stringent.
Yes. So we agree with that, Your Honor. We disagree with the assessment, but we're not really asserting that here. Mm-hmm. We think we're just asserting that the government has the obligation to show what the mens rea is. And so even if you don't agree with anything Ms. Ballinger said, it probably wouldn't be relevant. All of this is on camera. Certainly the physical conduct is all on camera. Again, with respect to restricted area, we think the minimum definition of a restricted area is that boundaries reflecting government designations must, beyond a reasonable doubt, be materially present and identifiable for general observation at the time. Now, that is not the government's position. The government holds that if restricted boundaries were established in the morning, whether they are existent later at the time of the Price's Walk is not material. We disagree with that legal interpretation. We think the fundamental reason for the restricted area is notice. It's not authority. It's notice to the public of what is an ascertainable standard of guilt. We think that's the common reading.
So the district court found that there were bike racks that had signs on them that had been pushed down, but that your clients noticed that when they walked past.
So the district court, I don't believe, made that particular finding, Your Honor, but we showed in the brief that there were 3 bike racks across an area, and that those 3 bike racks got pushed to the side before my clients got there. There was 1 separate bike rack in the middle, sort of a T, just on its own, standing, and it wasn't blocking anything. It was off to the side. So this falls under a sort of separate issue of the district court's analysis, which is sort of a series of observations could substitute. So there was a single bike rack. It was not connected to anything. There were many people, police and everybody else, sort of passing it by. So we don't think that constitutes identification of the restricted
So, I mean,
area.
your view is that on January 6th, notwithstanding everything that was going on at the Capitol building, the sirens are blaring, the tear gas is flowing, there's commotion, that it was not sufficiently clear that you're not supposed to go into the Capitol building.
Well, you're speaking to a mens rea question, first of all. We're starting with the question of, is there a restricted area, which is completely separate from mens rea? And we're stating that the way to define restricted area is materially present at the time for observation. Now, there are other tools that the police have for dispersal orders, all kinds of things. And we're just referring to our client situation here. So for example, at the Senate wing door, we have a very specific situation with the police cordon there. We have no idea what happens in the rest of the Capitol, and we're not really speaking to that. But in that very specific situation, we do have an actual material police cordon, and we're consistent with the general definition of police cordons at the time, or in America, which is you can walk in front of police. And that's all they did. So they entered an open door and walked in front of police and then left. That's their entire crime. I would like to turn to the disruptive conduct.
Quarter for the craven! Look at them run! We've shown them! Heaven be praised!
Victory is ours!
Victory is ours! We've shown them! Yes! We won! Ha ha!
We won!
Remember this! We've been blessed!
Victory is ours!
Greetings, my lady. I don't believe that we've met.
States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit are admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting. God save the United States and this honorable court. Be seated, please. Case number 23-3198 et al. United States of America versus Cynthia Ballinger, appellants. Mr. Ken Karamat for the appellants, Mr. Hill for the appellate.
Good morning, counsel. Mr. Ken Karamat, please proceed when you're ready.
Good morning, and may it please the court. I'm Nandan Kinkaramath. I represent Cynthia Ballinger and Christopher Price. They're a married couple. I may refer to them as the Prices. I've reserved 2 minutes for rebuttal. The Prices properly argue that their entry in less than 1 minute walk south the hallway, followed by 5.5 minutes of standing in line to exit, was in complete compliance with the police cordon that was right there at the door. As they entered, there was a police line to the left. They walked to the right for a minute. They encountered Officer Atax, and there may have been another officer there. They never went that point. In fact, no one who entered in the video in that arena went past Officer Atax. That was another side of the cordon. So they walked through an open door, and like any public building, it doesn't mean you're going to go any further. You'd be subject to whatever the police tell you, and they were in complete compliance with whatever the police told them. We're going to highlight fundamental differences in statutory interpretation of restricted area, disruptive conduct, and the count 2 provision that there be in fact causation from disruptive conduct that leads to the delay of the proceeding in this case until 8 p.m.
Mr. Kinkaramath, can I ask you a particular question that I'm interested in? I'm particularly interested in your argument that there was insufficient evidence to support mens rea for counts 2 and 3. More specifically, whether the evidence shows that the Prices had an intent to disrupt official proceedings. Now, of course, it's very difficult to make out an insufficiency of the evidence argument. And so I'm just wondering, what is your strongest argument that there was insufficient evidence to support mens rea for counts 2 and 3 specifically?
So we think that the mens rea must be associated with the physical conduct of the Prices. So you can assemble a lot of statements, right? But what is the physical conduct of the Prices? So let's talk about the 5 minutes standing in line to exit. What is the mens rea of standing in line to exit? It is to stand in line to exit. So the only mens rea issue we have here is really the 1 minute walk, and then the police officer asks them to go no further, and they do. So part of our point is all of this long conversation and all of these other issues, which are somewhat tangential, can't ascribe to the actual physical conduct. And the mens rea scope shouldn't be broader than the physical conduct. So in other words, first of all, you have to have the physical conduct, and we're arguing that didn't occur and that there wasn't a restricted area. Beyond that, with respect to the intent requirement, we think you have to, again, think of the common sense situation here. They observed a door, they went into a door. All of the heightened mens rea requirements, intent to disrupt, all of these other things, there wasn't a lot of facts provided on that, but it all has to rest on the physical conduct of entering for a minute in front of a large number of police officers.
So you're talking about the intent to disrupt the proceeding? That's the mens rea question?
Correct. The key mens rea questions that we're challenging are on counts 2 through 4, Your Honor. Disruptive conduct and demonstrative conduct.
Was it not the intent of the entire gathering to disrupt the proceeding?
You know, we believe that the charges are against individuals, and the question is, what is the individual
Right, so those individuals who are part of the gathering.
Well, this was an argument made by the district court as a different element, even on the issue of physical conduct, which is that they quote unquote joined the mob. Now, that argument is not opposed or not discussed in the government's brief at this time. We think that is a fundamental point, that the district court has this sort of joining construct. We think that joining construct is not legal because the charging documents talk about individual conduct. They could have charged aiding, abetting, conspiring. They could have charged a group that is permissible under 5104E, but they did not. So the relationship to the group issue, first of all, we don't think there's any evidence of it. They don't know any of these people. So the conduct at issue is their disruptive conduct for the individuals, not their relationship to a group. So we would argue that, and as a point of legal interpretation, we think that's different. Also, we would point out that none of that relationship issue was raised in the charging documents. And so we had no opportunity. The notion of joining a mob was never raised during the trial until closing arguments. So I had no opportunity for discovery. I had no opportunities to talk about the issues. We supplied a joint statement of elements, never discussed this term, this concept of joining. With respect to
how should we understand the district court's credibility determinations here? Because the district court did make some determinations that Ms. Ballinger, Ms. Price, was not credible in describing her motives for participating in the events of January 6th. How should we view that? I mean, because the standard of review here is very, very stringent.
Yes. So we agree with that, Your Honor. We disagree with the assessment, but we're not really asserting that here. We think we're just asserting that the government has the obligation to show what the mens rea is. And so even if you don't agree with anything Ms. Ballinger said, it probably wouldn't be relevant. All of this is on camera. Certainly the physical conduct is all on camera. Again, with respect to restricted area, we think the minimum definition of a restricted area is that boundaries reflecting government designations must, beyond a reasonable doubt, be materially present and identifiable for general observation at the time. Now, that is not the government's position. The government holds that if restricted boundaries were established in the morning, whether they are existent later at the time of the Price's Walk is not material. We disagree with that legal interpretation. We think the fundamental reason for the restricted area is notice. It's not authority. It's notice to the public of what is an ascertainable standard of guilt. We think that's the common reading.
So the district court found that there were bike racks that had signs on them that had been pushed down, but that your clients noticed that when they walked past.
So the district court, I don't believe, made that particular finding, Your Honor, but we showed in the brief that there were 3 bike racks across an area, and those 3 bike racks got pushed to the side before my clients got there. There was one separate bike rack in the middle, sort of a T, just on its own, standing, and it wasn't blocking anything. It was off to the side. So this falls under a sort of separate issue of the district court's analysis, which is sort of a series of observations could substitute. So there was a single bike rack. It was not connected to anything. There were many people, police and everybody else, sort of passing it by. So we don't think that constitutes identification of the restricted
So, I mean,
area.
your view is that on January 6th, notwithstanding everything that was going on at the Capitol building, the sirens are blaring, the tear gas is flowing, there's commotion, that it was not sufficiently clear that you're not supposed to go into the Capitol building.
Well, you're speaking to a mens rea question, first of all. We're starting with the question of, is there a restricted area, which is completely separate from mens rea? And we're stating that the way to define restricted area is materially present at the time for observation. Now, there are other tools that the police have for dispersal orders, all kinds of things. And we're just referring to our client situation here. So for example, at the Senate wing door, we have a very specific situation with the police cordon there. We have no idea what happens in the rest of the Capitol, and we're not really speaking to that. But in that very specific situation, we do have an actual material police cordon, and we're consistent with the general definition of police cordons at the time, or in America, which is you can walk in front of police. And that's all they did. So they entered an open door and walked in front of police and then left. That's their entire crime. I would like to turn to the disruptive conduct finding, and what I want to do is articulate the distinction between the DC Circuit case of United States v. Alford and the district court's opinion. So the district court's opinion was very specific. They said this would not have been disruptive conduct except for the Prices joined a mob. we've already argued that that is incorrect as a matter of law. We've argued it in the brief. It's a separate legal argument. The case of Alford doesn't necessarily make that argument, but I think an important distinction between Alford and this case is Alford did not on appeal argue that there wasn't the restricted area where he walked or that he didn't have knowledge of a restricted area. And we're arguing that specifically on the facts. And the key holding in it, Alford, is that things should be context specific, a point that we agree with, and we just simply state the context of this case is very different, and you have to look at our specific facts to determine whether there's disruptive conduct and that there really isn't a join the mob construct available to the court.
I want to make sure you get your rebuttal time too, but let me see if my colleagues have additional questions for you at this time. We'll make sure that you get the 2 minutes of rebuttal time that you asked for.
Thank you.
We'll hear from the government now. Mr. Hill.
May it please the court, Dietrich Hill on behalf of the United States. I do want to start with what I think is an important distinction here, which is whether there was in fact a restricted area versus the knowledge element of the 1752 offenses, whether the defendants knew that there was a restricted area. With respect to the first, there's not a real dispute here that at the beginning of the day, on January 6th, the government restricted this entire perimeter with barriers, with fencing, with area closed signs, and with police officers stationed around this perimeter. So with respect to whether the area was in fact restricted later, the defendants have to be relying on the idea that when rioters moved aside these barriers, forced the police officers to retreat, tore down many of the area closed signs, that had a legal effect that legally de-restricted the area. That's not a sensible way to read a statute about the lawful authority of lawful law enforcement agencies restricting an area.
Mr. Hill, if I can ask you, I mean, do you think for counts 2 and 3, does the government agree that there is a separate element to demonstrate intent to disrupt an official proceeding?
Yes, we think there has to be, well, at the very least, knowledge that your conduct is going to be disrupted.
Well, I mean, both statutory provisions use the term intent to disrupt an official proceeding. So that seems to be an element of the crime.
Yes.
And so, of course, while it's a high bar to demonstrate that the evidence was insufficient to support the conviction, it's not impossible. We have a number of cases in the DC Circuit finding evidence insufficient. So I guess I'm just wondering, I mean, it seems that the district court pieced together a lot of evidence, some of it from days before January 6th. And some of the idea that there was an intent to disrupt an official proceeding may be characterized as mere speculation. So I'm wondering how the government would respond to that.
Well, I certainly would agree that there were a lot of different pieces of evidence of intent here. And of course, as Your Honor referred to, on a sufficiency challenge, we're entitled to the most favorable inference that can be drawn from any of those pieces of evidence.
It's the most favorable inference, but it still can't be speculation. There still has to be the government still has to demonstrate there was intent to disrupt an official proceeding. And here, the Prices walked in when there was no official proceeding going on. They stayed for a few minutes and walked out when directed by an officer.
Right, well, I would start with what I think is an undisputed fact that the Prices understood that there was a certification going on the day.
Right, so even assuming that's true, they knew there was a certification, they knew there was an official proceeding, government has probably shown that they knew they were entering a restricted area of the Capitol building, but where's the intent to disrupt an official proceeding for these defendants in particular?
Right, well, if there's an official proceeding going on at the Capitol on the day, the certification of the election, and you go into the Capitol understanding that that's a restricted area, being able to see that you're augmenting a mob which is occupying the Capitol, you have to know that that mob is preventing Congress from resuming its proceeding. In other words, you have to know when you go in that you're going to help these other people impede the official proceeding.
So you could have a situation conceptually in which somebody goes into a restricted area, but they don't intend to disrupt the proceeding that's going on in the area, right? I mean, you could have somebody who just wants to come in and observe, even though it's restricted. They want to come in and observe, and they want to take a picture to show that they were there, but they don't want to actually disrupt it.
I agree that that's conceptually possible. But here you have a lot of different evidence, including communications from the defendants, like just taking over the Capitol. That was a text from Mr. Price. We just stormed the Capitol. That's a text from Ms. Ballinger. These things strongly
in context,
suggest.
Doesn't that suggest they were joking since they were just walking into the Capitol without, I mean, doesn't it?
That's one conceivable inference. But again, we're entitled to the more favorable inferences, which they were not joking. They understood that they had joined a mob to take over the Capitol with the specific intent of disrupting what was going on inside the Capitol. That's the more favorable inference to the government from, we just stormed the Capitol. And of course, the defense—
And the district court did make those findings.
And the district court did make those findings, correct. Discrediting Ms. Ballinger's testimony that she was joking when she said, we stormed the Capitol. And I would also point to a text message exchange from before they walked to the Capitol, where Ms. Ballinger texted a friend, there was a breach at the Capitol. I would have been there, except that we had to stop so I could use the bathroom. Again, that shows this isn't just walking in as a tourist. They understand that the Capitol is closed. There's been a breach. She wanted to be there and wasn't, and then they go right over there to help the mob occupy the Capitol so that Congress can't continue the certification proceedings.
Well, but based on their behavior, there was, arguably an intent to enter a restricted building, the Capitol. But based on their behavior, where's the intent to disrupt? So maybe there were other people there who were intending to disrupt the official proceedings, but the Prices walked in and walked out.
Right, but I think when you put together knowledge that the certification is going on and knowledge that the area is restricted because of the certification, with going in to take over the Capitol, to storm the Capitol, when you put those together, you have an intent to disrupt the certification by occupying the Capitol. And I would like, again, to return to this idea of whether there was knowledge as opposed to whether there was a restricted area, because there were a lot of elements showing knowledge of the certification and the fact that there was a restricted area. As Your Honor pointed out, maybe one or two of these elements alone would not have been sufficient. And the district court acknowledged that as well and said, when the Prices entered the restricted area at the very beginning, at the perimeter, it's conceivable that they didn't understand yet that they were in a restricted area. By the time they're entering the Capitol, they can see people trying to break in to the Capitol through the windows, clearly disruptive conduct. And their choice is to go into the Capitol where people have been breaking in through the windows. There's glass on the floor. There's a blaring alarm. Joining those people who have set off the alarm is virtually certain to increase the disruptive conduct and the disruptive effect of this mob on the certification proceedings. And I would also like to point out that the intent here and the conduct here is to disrupt or impede. And we think that impede does some work here because you can impede a proceeding before it's even begun, and certainly you can impede a proceeding while it's been suspended by preventing it from restarting within a reasonable period of time. The fact that they were in the building, every person in the building was a person that the Capitol Police had to clear out of the building. And that's in the record. There's testimony from the Capitol Police captain saying even one unauthorized person in the building was impeding Congress from restarting the certification proceedings.
I mean, your view of it is as if there were, a bulletin sent out in advance that said, look, we want to, on the part of the people who come to the Capitol and want to disrupt the proceeding, let's just assume there's at least some. And they send out a bulletin, they say, we want to impede this proceeding. We want to at least stop it for a little while. The more people that we get to show up and go in the Capitol, the more likely it is that we're actually going to be successful in impeding the proceeding. And so therefore, everybody who signs up and signs on to that cause is part of that effort to impede the proceeding.
Right. Now, of course, there's no evidence that these defendants saw the bulletin, but
I'm saying that's the effective, that's
exactly
the effect of that is what you think is going on.
That the effect of seeing this and knowing that, it wasn't like the Capitol was open to force. There was a breach at the Capitol. That's Ms. Ballinger's own text. And so she understands that people do want to disrupt the proceeding, and that therefore the more people who go into the Capitol, the greater that disruption is going to be.
And the longer it's going to take to disperse it.
And the longer it's going to take to disperse all of the people. With respect to the other issues, Well, I think with Alford, I do want to point out that this court in Alford explicitly acknowledged that Alford's conduct alone, like the defendant's conduct in this case, would not necessarily have been disruptive. So there's no distinction there between Alford and this case.
But that case was about whether there was knowingly disruptive conduct. It wasn't about intent. And I went back and looked at the briefing. Alford didn't argue the intent prong separately the way the Prices have in this case.
Your Honor, I guess I don't see a strong distinction between knowing that your conduct is going to disrupt and then intentionally engaging in that disruptive conduct, as opposed to a separate intent to disrupt. I would think that if you're knowingly engaging in conduct, and you know that that conduct is going to be disruptive, that evinces an intent to disrupt. I'm not sure I see a strong distinction there.
Well, I mean, there seem to be, like under 1752A, you have to knowingly and with intent to impede or disrupt the orderly conduct of government business or official function, engage in disorderly or disruptive conduct. So Alford seems to go to the element that they engaged in disorderly or disruptive conduct simply by being part of the people who entered the Capitol on January 6th. But the statute seems to have, and this was the first question I asked you, whether there's a separate element of an intent to impede or disrupt the orderly conduct of government business.
Right, so I think knowingly in that statute is doing several pieces of work because you also have to have knowledge that it's a restricted area. But I think if you know that you're engaging in disruptive conduct and you engage in that disruptive conduct, I think that also covers the intent to disrupt. I'm not sure when there would be when you would be intentionally engaging in disruptive conduct without having...
You could be engaging in disruptive conduct without an intent to impede official proceedings. Or at least that seems to be how the Congress wrote this statute. And you agreed that it was a separate element of the crime, which the government has the burden to demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yes. I guess I would say then that the evidence here, almost all the evidence of knowingly, also goes to an intent to disrupt. When you know that there's a certification and you're walking in, it's hard to understand that differently than joining a mob that you know generally has the intent to disrupt. So you're augmenting not just the physical conduct, but also the intended result from that mob's actions.
My colleagues don't have additional questions for you.
Thank you. We would ask the court to affirm the judgment.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Mr. Kinkeramouth, we'll give you the 2 minutes you asked for rebuttal.
Thank you, Your Honor. The police officers spent not 1 second on the Prices. Immediately upon being told, don't go further, the Prices get in line to exit. And this argument of mere presence and burden, it has to be shown beyond a reasonable doubt that this is disruptive, whether it's on disruptive conduct or any other principle. And
two bodies, riddled with scars from our preteens, intertwined in a car's dirty backseat. Stare at a driving screen. We didn't know that the sun was collapsing till the seas rose and the buildings came crashing. We cried, oh, everywhere, everything. Wanna love you, to food for the worms to eat till our fingers decompose. Keep my hand in yours. Everywhere, everything. Wanna love you, to food for the worms to eat till our fingers decompose. Keep my hand in yours. Drive slowly, I know every route in this county. Maybe that ain't such a bad thing. I'll tell you where not to speed. It's been a long year and all of our books pages dog-eared. We write out the ends on our palms here, then forget to read. We didn't know that the sun was collapsing till the seas rose and the buildings came crashing. We cried, oh, everywhere, everything. Wanna love you, to food for the worms to eat till our fingers decompose. Keep my hand in yours. Everywhere, everything. Wanna love you, to food for the worms to eat till our fingers decompose. Keep my hand in fingers decompose. I'll keep my hand in yours.
You best back off. Scores of our brothers are just over that ridge over there, waiting for our signal. let's back off. There's dozens.
Living on the road, my friend, gonna keep you free and clean. Now you wear your skin like iron, your breath is hard as kerosene. Weren't your mama's only boy, her favorite one it seemed. Began to cry when you said goodbye.
Back off, stranger.
Pancho was a bandit boy. His horse was fast as polished steel. He wore his gun outside his pants for all the honest world to feel. Pancho met his match, you know, on the deserts down in Mexico.
Oh yay, oh yay.
Got a brand new
Y'all ready?
Never let go. Never let go. Never let go.
Let go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Remy Wolf. And this is my song called Toro. Dancing around and spilling wine, you look good in my hotel room. Steam in the shower, singing slide. Wash your bone, I'm gonna need a little bit more soap. I fly to Miami in the morning. We could make this one count. And you're so heavy, I'm holding. I'm not worried about the sound of waking up the people down the hall. You're a bull, and I can't help but saying Toro.
What do you want with us?
Toro. And when they buzz me for the lobby call, I don't show 'cause I'm too busy saying Toro, Toro. Just like a toreador. Just like a toreador. I'm putting the tray outside the door. I want more. I'm drooling like a rabid dog. And I'm screaming out, baby, now hold me down, give me what I want. I fly to Miami in the morning. We could make this one count. And you're so heavy, I'm holding on, not worried about the sound of waking up the people down the hall. You're a bull, and I can't help but saying Toro, Toro. And when they buzz me for the lobby call, I don't show 'cause I'm too busy saying Toro, Toro. The things we do are so deplorable, horrible. Yeah, I'm too busy saying Toro, Toro. Just like a toreador. Just like a toreador, baby. No, I don't just like, I adore you. Just like a toreador. I can't help but saying Toro, Toro. Oh, I can't help but saying Toro, Toro. Oh, I can't help but saying Toro,
Good to see you.
Toro. Oh, I
Believe it
can't
or
help
not,
but
I
saying
mean that.
Toro.
I've been looking for you. Calm down now. I'll tell you everything. What? Scummy? Even in this profession, double-crossing your comrades is frowned upon. I know where he is now. If you agree, we can attack together and save your kin.
Thank you so much.
But in return, I will have the pleasure of killing that bastard. So what do you say? You can't trust me, but you need me. And I figure you have enough men that you could easily slit my throat pretty quickly if I lead you into a trap. And I don't need to trust you. You're my vehicle of revenge, not my partner. Splendid. But I have a few things to do. There is a hideout near this city. He keeps your siblings there. I will join you right where the path leads up, just out of the sight of their scouts. Ah, of course. I have no doubts on that score.
tiny. Thank you so much. Thank you guys. Like I said before, I'm Remy. I'm so fucking happy to be here. Yeah, I've been watching Tiny Desk since I was a little tiny 15-year-old child, and truly, what a blessing. Yeah. Oh my God, I'm gonna cry. Okay. Okay. This next song is called "Alone in Miami," and I wrote it about being alone in Miami. Here it goes. So the sound of crypto bros eating cubanos by myself. Brand new to town, dipping my toes. The water is warm, the walls are closing in on me in this Art Deco music. Daughters and thongs are roaming freely, pop stars in my DM. Alone in Miami with you there. Alone in Miami with you I met her with Maine, I bought cocaine. My clothes in the lobby waiting for me. And I'm on the list with that girl I kissed.
You've finally
We're on the
arrived.
rocks,
I
but
have a
now
few things to
we're
say before we
okay.
attack.
Playing
We have to be
DJ
clever.
in
He is
the
a cunning fellow in that duty.
Yeah, we're okay. Eating sushi long as Playboy pays. Alone in Miami with you there. Alone in Miami with you there. If you don't understand me, then who can? Alone in Miami, alone, alone. I'm on the highway, I'm going real fast with my new friends. It's 4 a.m. Hula hooper on the dash. I'll roll the dice in the white tent. Outside, we're listening to German techno laser beats.
Why in here? Places like this. Anyway, what do you want?
Alone in Miami with you there. Alone in Miami with you there. If you don't understand me, then who can? Alone in Miami. Alone, 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 alone. Thank you so much. Wow! Thank you. Oh my. Thank you. You guys are so nice and loud. Wow. Those past two songs I just released. And yeah, I put out an album. It's called Big Ideas. It's cool. Really like it. But I also have some old songs. And this song's an older one off of my first album that I released called Juno. And this song is called Sexy Villain. Thank you. But I am a person that gets really bored of my own music. So we have kind of turned the song into something else. And I hope you like it. Okay, here it goes. you write it. A sexy villain. Sexy villain. Oh, sexy villain. Sexy villain. Villain, villain. I got a bird's eye view of the way you move. I follow you out of a crowded room. I switch my bug for a brand new Beamer. I left my boy watching Euphoria, and he's a keeper, big believer. Long as he don't check the freezer. Yum, yum, yum. I'm cool with the hide, and cool if the cops aren't invited. Yeah, I'm too tantalizing, I'm too good at keeping them quiet.